2 minutes. All right, welcome back to the e-commerce logistic Asia Summit. Thanks again for joining us for this event today. Our next speaker is with us. I would like to introduce you to Long Wang, who is the China co-founder of eBeauty Holdings. Long has over 15 years experience in leadership in supply chain, logistics, and e-commerce. He joined Amazon after obtaining his MBA from MIT, and was later appointed to be the Director of Transportation and Supply Chain for Amazon in China. Long is an entrepreneur. He's a founding member and a CEO of UCO, a leading cosmetics e-commerce company in China, and serving as chairman for ProA, which is a total retail supply chain solution provider. So again, if you have any question for Long, you can push them into the Q&A tab on the right side of the screen. We're going to hear from Long first, and then he will be with us for the live Q&A. So let's hear from Long Wang first.
Thank you, Max, for the introductions. It's great to be here and share with you our omni-channel experience in China. You may not know about eBeauty, so let me just give a brief introduction about myself and my company. As Max has introduced, I'm the CEO of eBeauty Group. We do e-commerce retail for leading beauty brands. Personally, I have experience in e-commerce. We're starting with Amazon. I also have offline experience working with offline retailers and apparels, Mittelspunni, and also consulting experience, and I do have an MBA. eBeauty, we started 12 years ago. Now we have grown to having over $3 billion in sales last year. We serve brands including the top 10, all of the top 10 eBeauty cosmetics companies in the world. And we serve over 80 brands. Some are the major brands, as I have said. Some are the smaller incubating brands that are up and coming and maybe the leader in a certain niche categories. So with our experience working with these brands, so we have gone through the role with them for them to enter e-commerce in China and for them to develop a omni-channel strategy. And we have developed our supply chain capability to meet these omni-channel opportunities, business opportunities. So I would like to share with you how this impacts the supply chain and what are the strategies that we use to cope with it, and some case study as well. The core of the omni-channel is its consumer centricities. Now, in the past of retails, when it first started in China in the 80s and 90s, most of the brands are only serving a single channels. In the 2000s, it spread into modern trade through distributors, maybe opening up their own shops. And as e-commerce started to proliferate in China in the early 2010s, many companies are starting to operate. When most companies enter into e-commerce, they just treat it as one of the channels. But starting 2010s, especially with the proliferation of mobile device, many companies and many brands start to crossover, have cross-channel operations, meaning that they may offer membership points, loyalty points. Customers maybe they contact the customers via a Alipay or WeChat or mobile advertising, some location-based service, and for them to either purchase at the store or vice versa. They may drive customers to try at the store and then purchase online. And with cross-channel, it starts morph into omni-channel in a sense that the first time we see is price synchronizations. In the past, there's maybe different pricing for different channels, but and also, but now, I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. It's because of the transparency of in omni-channel sales environments. And also, we may have services such as buy online, pick up offline, buy online and you return offline, so on and so forth. The gist of it, for what we describe as omni-channel is being customer-centric. We believe the omni-channel is the future of retails, and the retail can be described. There's three elements of retails: the people, the product, and the place where the sales happens. In the past, where we shop it may be online, it may be offline, but gradually in the omni-channel environments, we are looking into scenario-based shoppings, that the brands are not considering where they place the shop or where the points of sales happens, but considering how consumers are buying their things, in what scenario, in what conditions are they buying. Are they thinking about they need it for gifting, or do they buy it for immediate usage, or would they plan to buy it? Are they being influenced by external influencers, right? So those are different scenarios. Now, in the past, products are just inventories to be placed at the right place at the right time. But in the omni-channel world, it's more like extending on the scenario-based shopping. So there's an entire shopping experience. It's multifaceted, that include both not just the product but the service that you receive along with it. And so that is the placement of the product is more than just the product itself, but how you present the product. And for the people in the past, consumers, they are just there to buy the product. But in the omni-channel world, I mean, in the new retails, we see that the people may influence how we produce the product even. Customizations and personalizations is a big part of the omni-channel shopping experience. So the whole traditional retails were more based on product-based, inventory-based, and we're moving into more consumer-based. It depends on depends on how the consumers are going to touch and consume and buy the product that you have to offer. And so in the traditional retail supply chain, we are more focused on optimizing the manufacturing of it. So in the 90s and 2000s, with all these supply chain technology and internet, we are still focused with most of our energy for supply chain professionals are focusing on how to achieve a greater scale of manufacturing to lower the cost, because the downstream retail fulfillment is still channel based. So for each of the channels, they have their own supply chain. They don't mix. We're not sharing inventories across channels. And so the fulfillment supply chain is still relatively simple. So most of our supply chain optimization focus is on the upstream. So as such, for most of the brands, when they first move into e-commerce, they will keep their offline retail supply chain intact and have a separate e-commerce fulfillment channels, because the fulfillment operations for e-commerce is vastly different than the offline fulfillments. So it's not just easier for them to treat it as a separate channels, and in terms of supply chain management, because that's how they manage their sales, just being separate. Now, in the omni-channel supply chain, it's more data and demand driven. So as what I have described earlier, right, we are being consumer focused, consumer centric. The interaction with the customers is direct, right? So in the traditional supply chain and business, traditional retails, the brands may not even know who the consumer is. They are selling to distributors, or they're shipping to store, and the store is just a transaction. They have a transaction data, but they may not have the consumer data. But in the omni-channel world now, with the proliferation of mobile device, we use a lot of the loyalty points or others marketing gimmicks to actually we know who the consumer is. And of course, in an online transaction, you know exactly who you're dealing with. So the brands actually are more customer centric. And in terms of our supply chain structures, we can try to fulfill to the consumer's needs via direct either through the stores or even e-commerce, or directly from the manufacturers. You don't necessarily need to separate your fulfillment supply chain by channels anymore. The idea is to get the product to the customers with the service that they wanted, in a way and the time that they wanted it. So it's a very the supply chain, the fulfillment of the products become part of your service and product offering in the omni-channel world. So as such, the network may be very different. First of all, you may not even need to separate your inventory by channels anymore. You can share the inventories. You could fulfill any channels from any warehouse. It may be coming from the main DC. It may be coming from your partner warehouse. Your e-commerce warehouse, or what used to be e-commerce warehouse, can also fulfill the offline stores. And in China, we also have a big cross-border e-commerce business, and that can come directly from overseas into the bonded warehouse. And we can further optimize the supply chain by cross-docking directly into our regional warehouse. The warehouse does not need to be separate by channels anymore. It can be separate. It can be optimized based on inventory and fulfillment efficiency. When we are converting or moving from traditional into omnichannel retails, this is a lot more complex. For the type of orders, it no longer just pallet or full case. You need to have piece pickings and pack into a small packages. For inventories, because we are now sharing inventory across different channels and even across business entities, there's different business rules that we have to comply to, and that constraints can be a lot more complex to handle. And in terms of fulfillment, distributions and logistics, it needs to be a lot more dynamics, both in terms of planning and executions. And so it will impact our picking and storage, and we need to have more automations and have different new business standard operating procedures. In cosmetics, but as well as farmers and food categories, there may be personalization requirements and also managing the expiry date. Again, that require more powerful systems and also better operations procedures. In order to share inventories, we need to have better supply chain platform in terms of systems. We need to be able to allocate inventory and optimize our fulfillment plannings. Our forecasting and replenishment operation also need to revamp to take advantage in order to support the inventory sharings. And for logistics, in addition to better systems, we also may need to have a better network, a different network. The network, as I said earlier, based on the efficiency of the fulfillment, not based on the channels. We really need to have all these success factors in order to have these omnichannel supply chain capabilities. So we believe that a holistic strategy should include integrated system solutions that can support multi-channel inventory management, real-time data, fulfillment capability that is omnichannel fulfillment capability, and also have the flexibility for expansion, because e-commerce volumes fluctuate a lot, especially in China. So at eBeauties, I'm going to share with you two cases where we have with our brand customers. The first one is a cosmetic distributors that have a host of brands. They use our complete solution, so including both the systems and logistic and fulfillment operations, and that help them achieve so the shared pool of inventories allocate among different channels, both online and offline. And we have another brands that their internal processes still require them to separate the offline and online, but we co-locate the both operation into the same warehouse. So even though that theoretically they are two different operations, online, offline are still different, separate. The inventories are not shared directly, like they are not shared virtually, but we because we operate under one roof. So in essence, the physical distance between the online offline warehouse is very small, so we can make a quick transfer and still support like basically we still can share inventory with a little lead times. And I'm happy to report that the brands is agree with our visions and is going to move into more omni-channels by sharing inventories down the road. So that's it. In discussion, it should be implemented in the next couple of years. So with those case studies, I can share with you some of the discussions we have when we're talking to brands and how we help them implement these omni-channel supply chain transformations. There's a host of factors you should consider when you implement a holistic strategy. Some are strategic elements, including network design, operating models, and also your digitalizations and automation strategy. This you really have to answer is that what your core competency is and which part of the value chain you must control as part of your strategy. And in terms of operational elements, we need to consider data information flow, how you execute, and how you manage logistic network. And what we really need to consider as an answer is that what type of service and SLA we need to meet based on the business strategy. And also, what are the capabilities that we need to acquire that is not currently in-house? To formulate first a consumer-centric supply chain strategy is the key. You need to identify the problems that you need to resolve. That is more business related, so you need to have a close and honest conversation with the business leaderships in order to understand how we better design our supply chain strategy to support the business vision. And in terms of the and then we need to design a supply chain network and inventory model. We need to study any digitalization automation technology that we may have that can be useful in our pursuit of supply chain excellence. And we need to consider the operating models that we want to operate on and how we change the supply chain organizations and network into the to-be omni-channel network. And for the operationally, we need to consider the end-to-end information flow so that we can work backwards, identify the technology that we need. In terms of fulfillment execution and the warehouse operation, we need to identify the new capability that we need to have, possibly enhance using automations. And in terms of logistics, we may need to complement and add our logistic capabilities and using new vendors, and also on how to monitor the quality of the logistic operations in order to meet customers' service level requirements. IT systems enable these excellence in warehouse management and inventory optimizations. So we need to have to support the omni-channel inventory operations. We need to have a better supply chain middle platforms. And in terms of warehouse and distribution integrations, we need to have new processes. And in terms of, and we may want to consider automations in order to improve our warehouse efficiency and our ROI. For omni-channels, for brands, we may want to consider there may be different strategic considerations on how to pick a logistic providers in order to implement the omni-channel supply chain visions that the brand may have. If the brands are more focused, the core values of the brand and the company is on brand management. They are better at deploying their capitals, and also they are more focused on want to have a operational cost that is related to their business growth. It is maybe outsourcing may be a better model. But if the company already have strong in-house IT capabilities and also have the supply chain management capabilities to manage the ever-changing needs of an omni-channel supply chain dynamic environments, then there may be elements that the brands may want to build in-house. The use of outsourced partners has multiple advantage in terms of they have bigger scales and they have more experience working with different encountering different supply chain problems. But there's also arguments to be made for having this in-house if a supply chain so the supply chain capability is really a differentiation in your industry and in your particular segments, retail segment. So when we assess our outsourced partners, we really need to think about first, what's the need and what's our intentions for outsourcing. And everybody, of course, want lower cost, but we also consider long-term collaborations. So especially in China, where there's a lot of up and coming contract logistics and supply chain vendors that are catered to omni-channels and e-commerce, there's a lot of cost competitions. But we need to understand why the cost is low, and because that may means that there's operations risk that we may not be able to afford to stand. When we should select higher quality players to compare to understand what is required to meet the business needs, and then of course use a tendering and procurement strategy to have the right mix of cost and quality trade-off. So this is something for brands to consider as they need to acquire and implement their omnichannel supply chain strategy. Thank you very much. I understand there's a lot of content today, and then I will happy to share our experience working with cosmetic brands on how to help them move into omnichannel retail and supply chain. So, Matt, do you have any other questions that you may want to ask? And I will also be happy to answer any question from the floor. Thank you.
Yes, I'm pretty sure we're going to have lots of questions. Thanks again, Long, for sharing this very interesting presentation. So if you do have a question for Long, make use of the Q&A tab located on the right side of the screen. You can push that question and then we'll bring it to Long. Before I jump into those questions, Long, let me ask you some more general ones. Okay, so our previous speaker, Keizo, has mentioned the increasing cost of launching and running e-commerce operations, which I think it's an ongoing and increasing problem across Asia as well. Given all the current difficulties that China has faced in the last 2 years, the increasing cost of outsourcing and also the super tough competition that the market is facing, do you think that China is still a market where brands stand a chance to actually make money?
Well, actually, many brands have made money in China, Matt. I think both of us and many of our partners and friends have. I think
I'm talking about maybe the new brands, the ones which are coming now, or trying to get into now.
Definitely. I think the era of the easier money is definitely over, though. I think, Matt, I think that's what you and I have alluded to. I think brands or like newcomers to China have to work harder to identify where their values are. So in the past, many people are willing to just throw the money into the market, try what stick, and many of them do succeed, even though that they may not be the best strategy, but it's a learning experience and they can still climb out of it. But I think the room for error is lower. Matt, I think I agree with that point of view. And but I do think that for companies that offer values and unique advantage to their consumers and to the marketplace in China, they will find ways to succeed working with partners or going by themselves and building the capability and hiring the team that they need to do. But it's no longer in our moment. So in the past, the most were more top line focus on trying to grow at whatever cost. But I think now it's time to be more prudent. I think a more prudent database assessment and decision approach will be beneficial. Small step, but change quickly to try out what works for you.
As an extension to this question, do you think a new brand entering China can make it without any kind of brick and mortar presence? Can it just be online and be successful?
I think many brand have been doing that. I mean, maybe some. I mean, most of them, if they try small step, they started with cross border, and if there's a good reception on cross border, they move into more domestic general trade, like doing import export. So maybe a year with cross borders, and a couple of years with the online, and then decide what you want to do. Now, of course, it depends on your brand DNA and also your ambitions in China. If you
Okay.
want to do a niche business, you can perfectly go and online only. But I think if you have a bigger ambitions, you want to stay for long terms, you want to have a wider audience, you want to achieve a certain scales, and you have the infrastructure globally. I mean, in like technology and the people and the expertise to do it, you will have to go into brick and mortar. I mean, you cannot avoid face-to-face interaction in a country as big as China with 1.4 billion people.
Okay. You mentioned in your presentation that warehouse don't need to be separated by channel. But is this already a reality when brands typically they will source their logistic to a 3PL, and some of them are tied up to some big marketplace which also offer their own logistic services. So, is this happening already?
So it depends on your strategy. So that's why I think the business, first of all, a lot of the barrier for moving to omni-channel supply chain was actually the business strategy, right? In the past, the business is selling separately by channels. You have internal salespeople fighting with each others for inventories, and they don't want to mix. And a lot of the internal rules in terms of accounting and even auditing, they may require you to separate by channels and the supply chain and inventory to be separate. Now, I think first of all, because of the business strategy is changing, and a lot of those rules really need to come from top down, right? So you have the top down mandate to change that culture and the decision making framework, right? So that can break down some of the organizational barriers and even accounting rules and such. And second is that uh, I think especially with the current economic challenge in China and the world is facing is that people are looking for new ways to grow profit, and they find a lot of the value loss by separating the channels. Right, by combining channel, you can have the potential to save a lot of the money, not just on logistic costs, but also your inventory costs. And sometimes that's the most important part of the elements to do business in the uncertain environments. So many companies are more willing to try. Uh, Now, what you said about having some, maybe their 3PL do not have omni-channel capability. Maybe some platform want to force you to separate by channels. That is a barrier to this trend. I think I mean, it may make sense for some company, especially for company with large scale, that it may still make sense for them to have a channel dedicated fulfillment for a portion of their overall supply chain. So those it can work, but I think more and more people will start to realize that it make more sense to have an omni-channel supply chain because you have a omni-channel business strategy to start with,
Yeah.
and supply chain is really there to serve the business.
Okay. Let's take those questions. We have a couple of them coming from the audience. Let me bring this first one from Tuan in Vietnam, asking, how do you manage high demand during flash sales, 10 times higher than regular, like double day event, to balance
Yeah,
fulfillment for both offline and online orders? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We being really kind to say just 10%. In our experience, it's more like 300 to 1,000. And
Yes.
of course our that's a sales, but on our shipping days it's more like 100 to 200 per day, 200 times. So the way to solve it is first, to do a lot of the optimizations, right? When you are basically when you're running the operation for 1,000 orders per day, and all of a sudden you have to switch to 100,000 orders in a warehouse, you have a totally different setup. Your technology need to support that kind of transformations, and without a lot of capital investment because it's going to be temporary. So we have built a lot of the software technology and a lot of the micro innovations to support that training and also the people. And second, right, you stretch out the time. Yes, while we only have 1 to 2 days to ship all these orders, but we prepare a month and to 2 months ahead of time. We pre-pack, we prepare the orders, we do forward shipping, a lot of the pre-processings that make the actual shipping faster. And third, this is only possible in China and maybe in Vietnam too, that people just ignore the rules, safety rules, like you stack the inventory very high, you are running your violation in all the Western style labor law, basically. In order to achieve this, and it is the environment that we are in, unfortunately, and we do try to make it up to the staff and also hire additional help. And of course, it's a relatively low cost environment in terms of labors, right? So that kind of make it possible. This will never be possible in a Western country, to be honest, in my opinion.
Okay. All right, let's take the next questions. This is from Jennifer. Let me bring this on screen. In relation to not meeting the commitment for delivery dates, how do you make it up to customers without incurring much cost?
Okay, so I will answer in the context of my presentation is that by being customer centric, right, the commitment to delivery, I think the important part is not to overpromise to start with. That meaning that because we should know our customer better, we should be more in tune and be more interactive. We can communicate a more proper delivery time. During pandemic, especially in China, there's a lot of lockdowns, and of course, there's a lot of congestion in the global supply chain also, right? So we should try to only sell things that we have stock, and we are out of stock. Then we communicate to the consumer what they can expect, and in terms of delivery, we communicate what we can do and cannot do. I think, and then sometimes dynamically, right? So we track the progress of our shipments, and we will issue alerts if we encounter any unexpected problems, right? So I think that is the more customer-centric strategy that we are actually trying to manage the customer expectation and communicate to them, rather than telling them that, hey, this is what I have. If I miss it, sorry, right? Now the second part of question is that so by having a more interventive and interactive approach to managing the expectation and also the process of delivery, we can intervene earlier, right? So oftentimes we identify the delay shipment before the customer realize it, and we'll contact them. Some of them will understand. Some of them may want to cancel their orders, which we can also understand. And we may, and also I think with the morning session from Tupperware is that some customers actually switch from offline shopping to online shopping for the very first time during the pandemics. So they do have different set of, you need to guide them on what to expect. And sometimes they over rely on online, and you need really to make it up to their experience, and that include not just logistics but also the discounting, maybe subscription, maybe other loyalty services from the brand. So that's what we do.
Okay, all right, let's move on to the next question. There are a lot of questions, so if you can keep your answer long, short as you can. This is a question from Mark. Regarding your customer-centric approach and considering the shipping crisis, how have you navigated the challenges of not meeting customer expectation, and have you introduced alternative channels to mitigate delays?
Yeah, I saw this question earlier in the Q&A. So the last question, the answers I give also applicable to this one. In addition, right, part of managing your robust supply chain network is to think of all the what if scenarios. So in this uncertain world, the only certain is what's certain is uncertainties, right? So we try to think of all the scenario we can think of, and to have to have backup plans to those suppliers or location or inventory or like customers messaging. And I think one thing I will also add related to my presentation is that you really need to think about the partners that you have. Are they on the same page as you? If you have good logistic partners, they will be coming up with these alternative channels for you, right? Just like what I have done for my clients, right? Before, like the Shanghai lockdown, my Max and I have both experienced. I have prepared tons of other warehouse available for customers that have warehouse in Shanghai, and we have run alternative route for them, like jumping hoops for our clients. So I think not having a reliable partners that are on the same page, share the same values as you are really important, because they are the one dealing with the everyday operation, and they'll be more knowledgeable than you in anticipation of uncertainties.
Okay. All right. Good. I don't think we're going to be able to take all those questions, but I'm trying to prioritize maybe the most interesting one. Maybe let's talk about product recall, returns, replacement. What's your take on this?
So we do. So that's the reverse logistics. And for cosmetics, the return rates are not that high, fortunately. But we do have specialized operation built for it. A lot of the brands are concerned about the authenticities of the products. We also try to. Some of the brands actually will destroy all the return product, but we have optimized for them for monitoring where the product has reached any end customers, and we also have a specialized program to inspect the quality of the products. But it is a costly operations compared to your outbound shippings, and companies should plan for it. It is unavoidable. So you just have to find a knowledgeable persons and partners to help you do it.
Okay. All right. Next question, I think, which is interesting and very relevant across Asia. It's about the sustainability aspect of a business, especially on the packaging side, where we see so much packaging, still a lot of plastic being used to wrap up cosmetics and bottles, and with cartons on top of that, and multiple layers of packaging happening. What are the brands doing to kind of be a bit more sustainable? And whose fault is that? Is this a marketplace fault, or is this a brand fault?
Yeah, I will break it into more micro answers and macroeconomic answers, right? From the microeconomic answers that, I think a lot of the companies are aware, and also I think to the question is that I think the consumers are more aware of it, so that allow us to reduce over packaging, especially for luxury product. And of course, there's a lot of innovations in terms of having recycled papers or a lot of the non-plastic stuffing materials that we can use. So I think it's a continuous process, and I think a lot of innovation will come off the marketplace. And also, I think there's also about messaging to the customers, so something to work with the marketing team and the branding team to come up with the packagings. From a supply chain macro point of view, is that e-commerce is actually more green than offline retail in terms of the logistic operation, in terms of store, in terms of the individual shoppings, right? So there's argument to be made that e-commerce is actually more environmental friendly, and you can definitely do a lot of green initiatives in terms of electric trucks and other things as well in terms of the overall supply chain sustainabilities.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we have a lot more questions. We're not going to be able to take them because our next speaker is on standby waiting to go. So for those who have asked questions, I will recommend that you actually push your question during either the break. Maybe Long, you can join us at some point during lunchtime, during our lunch. And we also have our WhatsApp group where you guys can continue interacting and ask questions. So I want to apologize to those. We will take all those questions, Long, and we will also share it with you. Maybe you can address them, in the group, and just just give your comments and your answers to that. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Long, for sharing your insights. Sorry for cutting you off on this, but our next speaker was actually overseas, also waiting, so we need to finish up. I will see you next time, Long. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Max.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.